Hey everybody, Bearded Rogue here. I don't know if anybody's going to watch this, but I wanted to go ahead and do a Periscope of a game that I'm working on called Dice Heroes. So Dice Heroes is... Hello. Dice Heroes is a card game. All of my games pretty much are card games. But Dice Heroes is a card game that tries to simulate an old-school theater of the mind dungeon crawl. So in Dice Heroes, each player has a hero. So let me zoom out a little bit. So you'll have your hero card here, which features the name of the hero, and then this section right here is where the art would be. But I don't have any art, so it just tells me which deck it is. This number in the top corner is hit points. This number in the top corner is armor. And then down at the bottom is the special ability. And we'll go into how that works. So they have the hero card, and then they have this series of cards that are all double-sided. And these are the special abilities that the heroes have. So have backstab, or it can be slice and dice. You can choose either one of these when you build your character at the beginning of the game you're going to do. However, you have to have one of each type. So this is a 3 and 4, and this one's the 5 and 6, and this one is the 7 and 8. You can have any of them, again, either side, but you have to have all of them. So the entirety of a hero looks like this. Can't do sideways landscape filming on Periscope, but it looks like this. So you'll have your hero card and then your 4 hero abilities. So the hero abilities will have their name, just like on the hero card, and then the 1 and 2 are actually the numbers on the die that you need to trigger those abilities. And then what the ability does is down here, and again, placeholder for where I don't have art. So on the hero turn, it's a completely cooperative game. Everybody's playing together against a dungeon deck. But on the... there's one of my cats. But on a hero's turn, all players have 2 dice. These dice are not unique to them. Everybody will roll their dice. So I roll these dice, and I get a 5 and a 7. And then we'll have another hero, let's say off screen, roll their dice, and they have a 3 and a 1. So all of these go into the middle of the table as a collective dice pool. Okay? And then each hero, in marching order, picks which die they want to use to activate their abilities. So let's say this rogue is going first. He's first in marching order. So he's going to take this 5, and he's going to activate his knockout blow, which lets him stun 2 undamaged enemy targets, or he can deal 3 damage to an enemy target. And he would decide how that was going to be used when he assigned the die, and it would take effect. And then the next person in marching order would then choose one of these dice to activate their ability. Again, it doesn't have to be the die they rolled. Say they really want this 7 that the rogue rolled, and they'll take it. Now the rogue comes back to his turn, and he's got a 3 and a 1, so he could activate either his slice and dice ability or his coup de grace ability here, because the 1 would activate slice and dice, because a 1 can be used, and this could be used for coup de grace, but he can only do one of them. He would pick one of these dice. Let's say he wants to do a coup de grace on the enemy that he damaged with his knockout blow, and so he's going to finish off an enemy and use that 3, and then this 1 is left over for the next person. Okay? So that's kind of the basics of the hero turn, is all of those things happen. Now, say the rogue wanted to use a second knockout blow. Okay? He would need a 6 to do so. If he had a 6 and a 5, he could use knockout blow twice. He can't use 2 5s or 2 6s. So every ability has 2 numbers that activate it, both so that you can more likely get what you want when a pool of dice are rolled. It's a 1 in 4 chance on a d8, and so that you could potentially use the same ability twice. Plus, d8s are much easier to use and handle than d4s. I was originally going to use a larger die, but 4 abilities actually appears to be more than enough when you have, especially a team of people. One of the other things is your hero ability. And your hero ability You'll always have a generic ability. So, like the rogue, once per turn, can re-roll one of the dice in the die pool, one of the die in the dice pool. He has to keep his second roll, but if you get a whole bunch of 7s, he could take a gamble and try to roll something different. In addition, whenever he spends a die to gain 1 attack, he can deal 2 damage. So let's say that we were presented with the same ability we had earlier, and he had this 3 that he could select, and he didn't want to use his coup de grace ability. He could instead just use this die and spend it, and it will do 1 damage. However, when he uses it to gain his attack, he'll deal 2 damage because of his special ability. And each hero has one of those kinds of abilities. When they spend a die to do damage, it's modified in some way. Like, for example, the warrior, when he spends a die to do damage, I don't know if this is going to focus, he gains a block counter. And the mage, whenever he spends a die, he actually gains a mana. And all of the heroes work differently. This stack is all of the heroes in the game. There are 11 different heroes. Each one works differently. The rogue is either, his abilities on either side, he's either an opportunist rogue, wherein he's picking off enemy targets, kind of scavenging what's left, or a ambush rogue, where he's targeting things that are undamaged and kind of opening them up for other people. So his abilities combo together, kind of having half of one and half of the other. He can both start and finish if he's just doing things by himself. But that's the rogue. The warrior is all about block counters. And again, we'll see if we can focus this. So, the warrior is the only person in the game that can accumulate multiple block counters. Everybody else can only get one at a time, and then when they use it, it's gone. In addition, the block counter adds 1 to his armor. So this up here is his armor. He subtracts 1 damage from everything that hits him, which means he's really good at blocking. The more block counters he has, the better he is at blocking. However, every time he gets hit, he loses a block counter. So that's what he gets to increase the armor. The penalty is that he loses his block counters. Everybody else can hang on to theirs when they get hit. The warrior can't. However, what the block counters allow the warrior to do is, so everybody goes in marching order. So their cards right now, they're just generic 1, 2, 3, 4. They don't have anything else on them. But what these do is, at the beginning of every hero turn, all the heroes will decide what their marching order is. So they'll pick 1, 2, 3, or 4, and that's the order they'll act in. So that's the order that they'll choose dice in their turn. It's also the order that the enemies will attack them in. So the enemies all have an initiative stat, and whenever an enemy attacks, it attacks whoever is number 1 first. And then other types of that enemy will attack the number 1 first, and then attack everybody else in order. So, like, kobolds, which are like a swarm of weenies deck, will kind of work their way through the whole party and may attack the first player multiple times, because he's the one who starts off the chain of attacks. So the warrior likes to be number 1 in marching order, because he can take the hits that the other guys can't. But his block counters let him do something interesting. So if he's number 1 and he takes that shot, he would lose a block counter just because he took damage, because he's the warrior. But then, say later on, when we get to the third marching order card, and it's the rogue who would take the shot. The rogue doesn't have any armor. He only has 10 hit points. He's not super squishy, but the lack of armor means that the warrior is a much better place for the blows to be landing. So the warrior could spend a block counter to take the hit for the rogue. So the warrior would then get hit on 3, and we would move on to 4, and the rogue would be skipped. So that's how block counters work. The warrior is really good at blocking his buddies. That's kind of his whole shtick. So he takes shots for other people, and he has damage-dealing abilities as well, mostly predicated on how much damage he's taken or how many block counters he has or things like that. The mage here actually has mana. So he's one of the characters that has tokens. So at the beginning of every start of hero turn, he gains a mana. He can also gain them when he spends a die to attack. So his attack spending ability is you get to attack for 1 damage, but you also gain mana when you do so. And all of his abilities are good. They're spells, but they get better with mana. So, like, for Vampiric Touch, he can deal 2 damage to an enemy target, and he either gets 1 mana, or he can spend a mana to heal himself. On the other side, it's Charm Person. And if that will focus, he can stun 1 non-boss enemy target. He can spend a mana to make an attack against a different enemy target using the enemy he just stun's attack value. So basically, he takes over an enemy and has them attack somebody else if he spends mana. Otherwise, he's just stunning somebody, which means that they won't activate in the enemy phase when they attack. Or he can put things to sleep, or he can allow a hero to flip one of their ability cards to the other side. So with a mage in the party, you can kind of guarantee that both sides of a card are in play, as long as you're willing to spend the thing. His superpowers, his 7 and 8, are really powerful, wherein they let him spend an unlimited amount of mana to either target a whole bunch of enemies and deal progressively less damage as it goes down the line, or to hit a whole bunch of enemies for big damage. So he's kind of the area control guy, and he kind of has to build up. Like, the more mana, the more chance he has to build up, the more powerful he is over the course of the game. And then the Cleric, and I don't know that we'll go through all of them, but I wanted to give some examples of how different the heroes are. The Cleric has the ability to heal people. That's his primary thing. One of the biggest things is when he spends his die, he actually heals people instead of dealing damage. Although he starts with a holy symbol token, so he has 1 token that's on his card, and whenever he spends a die to gain an attack, he can move that holy symbol and heals all heroes for 1 hit point. So he can heal everybody. But where his holy symbol is important. So if it's on him or another hero, it's basically a blessing. It means that any healing effects that hit that target gain additional hit points. However, if it's on an enemy, it acts like a burn counter. And a burn counter is basically a damage over time thing that ignores armor. You can only ever have 1 burn counter on you. You can't be more on fire than on fire. So it's just a damage over time thing that'll take effect at the beginning of the Cleric's turn. So he can put effectively a curse on something, or he can put a blessing on his buddies. And most of his stuff have to do with removing status effects or healing people. He does have some attacks, so he's not useless outside of healing people, but he's definitely the best healer in the game by design. I think we'll do maybe 1 or 2 more. So the Alchemist. The Alchemist was kind of inspired by my game Elements, so all of his special abilities are named after formulas that you can find in Elements. But what he does is, all the other heroes, whenever they select what they're going to do, they spend 1 die, and then it goes around the table, and then they spend another die. So the Alchemist abilities all actually have 2 parts, a Solvent and a Solute. And so what happens is when he goes to spend his first die, he actually spends 2 dice. And when he does that, he combines the solvent of one ability and the solute of another to create like 1 big ability that he lets loose with. So he spends both of his dice on his first dice allocation, and he doesn't get any additional dice. However, he can combine his effects to create kind of mix and match utility abilities. So, like the Basilisk Acid here, he can deal damage to an enemy target and place a poison counter on the target, or he can use it to place 2 poison counters on the target. Poison is also a damage over time thing. Poison does an amount of damage equal to the amount of poison counters that you've placed on something. So it accumulates over time and gets nastier, whereas Burn never accumulates. It just hits you once and then goes away. But Basilisk Acid, the Invisibility Potion, which lets him deal 2 damage to an enemy target ignoring block, or deal 2 damage to an enemy target other than the target of his solvent. So, like, were he to use Invisibility Potion and Basilisk Acid together, he could choose to, for example, deal 2 damage to an enemy target, place a poison counter on that target, and then deal 2 damage to an enemy target other than the one he hit with his first ability. Or he could deal 2 damage to an enemy target ignoring any block counters, and then place 2 poison counters on the target of his attack. Either one. but he decides when he allocates his dice. So the alchemist is all mix and match toolboxy. Let's see. Assassin deals with poison, as you can probably imagine. The barbarian gains fury, and he can spend fury to upgrade his attacks. The bard is all about dice manipulation. So, like, the bard with his special ability deals 2 damage, and then you can reroll all the dice in the dice pool with this ability. And he has some of the best names. That's not how it happened, or I've got just a thing. Deal 2 damage to an enemy target, and then set one of the dice in the hero dice pool to any value. So one of them is, let's mass reroll everything, and one of them is let's set 1 die to exactly what we want. But he's all about manipulating the dice pool, is what the bard does, in the context of telling a story. And then the monk has a counter that goes from one of his abilities to another. So he sets all of his abilities up in an order, and then each time he uses an ability, it moves to the next one, and whichever one it's on gets better abilities. So he's somewhat predictable. He has a predictable flow, but he gets benefits from being predictable. When he spends a die to gain an attack, he instead can reposition his counter. And then the paladin has auras. He can activate 1 aura a turn that just is in effect until the start of the next turn. So that's his ability. It has to be one of the auras on the attacks that he used. And then the sorcerer, the last one, I guess we will go through them all, but we're not going to go card by card for all of them. Sorcerer is actually the only one that has an extra rules card for his summons, so all of his abilities are actually also summons. So he can either use it as an attack, or he can put it into play as another hero target, in this case Sylph. It would be a 3 hit point, 1 damage target that will attack when the heroes attack. And it takes 3 hit points to kill it. While it's a summoned creature, he loses access to the attack ability on this, so he can no longer use the attack option while the Sylph is out there. But the Sylph ignores block tokens, so he can get around enemies that are blocking for their buddies. Or this one right here, Gnome is 4 hit points, 1 damage, and 1 hero gains a block counter, so it buffs people. And then there's the attack, and then the Fire Elemental lets you place burn counters on enemies that attack it, so you can direct attacks to it in place of the sorcerer. So he can throw this guy out here, and then anytime somebody goes to attack the sorcerer in the marching order, it will instead hit this guy, and it'll do damage to him, but it'll also take damage for doing so. And so that's how the sorcerer works. I have a couple of other characters that I don't have built yet, deck-wise. One of them is the Scout, who is all about manipulating the enemy's deck. And then one that is the Druid, who his abilities are forms that he can wild shape into. So he basically turns it into a passive ability that's always on for the turn. But those are the different heroes. Again, each one's only 5 cards. 4 of the cards are double-sided abilities, and then the rest of the other card is the actual hero card with its basic ability. Ideally, I'd like to have all of them be double-sided with the male and female for the artwork on all of them. So each one would have a male rogue and a female rogue kind of idea, so that you could pick to be either gender, because role-playing games don't really care which gender you are, they just care how much ass you kick. So this is all the hero stuff. I'll pull out one of the decks. All of the enemy decks are completely different. They all behave differently. I'm going to pull out if I can find it here, the kobolds, because they're the ones that's had the most testing. I'm just going to leave all the heroes scattered out. I'll pick them up after this. But the kobolds, each enemy deck has a rules card. So in this case, tells you what their setup is, how many you deploy each turn, and then any special rules for this. In this case, the kobolds deck actually has a boss, which is this guy here, Flame Tongue. He's a little dragonling that actually is in charge of the kobolds. So whenever you get through the kobold deck, then Flame Tongue comes out, and you reshuffle the deck, and it kind of becomes an AI for him. You deal cards out, and then depending on which cards come out, tells you how Flame Tongue attacks you. So this is a deck with a boss. But the rest of the cards are all enemy cards. They all kind of look the same. Name at the top, and then the hit points, the armor. Enemies have armor as well, and then their damage, the amount of damage they do, and then their initiative order. That's the time in the enemy turn in which they attack. And in this case, the Dragon Shield is a ready. Kobold Dragon Shield must be part of any attacks directed at their side, so they're like the 2 armor blockers for the other weaker kobolds. However, whenever you attack him, you exhaust him, and he deals 2 damage to whoever attacked him. So once he's exhausted, you can get by him. He's no longer blocking, but he eats an attack, basically, each turn, is what he's designed to do. And then the basic generic kobold. He's a 2 hit point critter. He does 2 damage. And whenever a kobold dies, you'll stand 1 kobold dragon shield. So he stands the blockers back up. If you attack around the blocker and kill a kobold, the dragon shield starts focusing on protecting his brethren again. Then let me see what else is in here. I'll find one. There we go. A Trap Master. So the Trap Master, when he ever enters play, you shuffle a trap from the discard pile back into the deck, and his attacks attack all targets and place burn counters, because he's basically throwing bombs at people. Because you can't have kobolds without traps. So the trap card, whenever it's revealed, so whenever you're deploying enemies to the field, and this one's revealed, it deals damage to all heroes ignoring armor, and then you discard it and play a card in its place. There are only 5 of them in the deck, but as you saw, anytime a Trap Master comes in, he shuffles one of them back into the deck, so as the Trap Masters come out, the traps fill up the deck more and more. So yeah, that's kind of the idea of the kobolds, is they're full of traps and little weenie monsters. None of their guys are really hefty. I mean, the Trap Master here at 4 hit points has the highest hit points of anything in the deck. Everything else is like a 2 or a 3, so they're a weenie deck that you fight your way through all of them, and then you fight the Dragonling at the end. I have 6 total enemy decks at this point. Kobolds are the first one, and they're by far the most tested. And then I also have the constructs, and the constructs basically have different targeting rules. Instead of targeting via the marching order, like typical, they instead deal out in front of heroes, and attack the hero they're in front of. And they change targets based on different criteria, like some will go after the weakest hero, some will specifically stay in front of who they're in front of. Some of them have block, but only as it pertains to the hero that they're in front of. So, like, the hero that they're in front of has to attack them, but could attack anybody else as well. Everybody else is free to target however they wish. The Cultist deck actually starts with a Sleeping Elder Thing in play that does nothing, but just has a lot of hit points and just sits there. He can't be damaged, stunned, or exhausted. However, he accumulates tokens of 2 different types. He accumulates tentacle tokens, which the tentacle cards are, in this case, based on the 7 deadly sins. And they each give him like a passive ability that comes into play. So he'll accumulate tokens by cultists. The different cultists will, like the horror cultist here, actually summons horrors, which can fight. The cultists don't do much of anything themselves. They're really weak. However, they will summon horrors, or the insanity cultists, or sorry, the blood cultist here, actually moves damage counters from the boss to him, just to reduce the amount of damage that the boss has taken. He sacrifices himself, basically. The insanity cultist here, he actually, if he's readied, you put tentacle counters on the boss, and the more of them that are out, the faster the boss accumulates insanity tokens, and so when he gets to 10, he gains a new tentacle card that adds a new passive ability to him when you finally fight him. But all those cultists are basically working to summon the sleeping elder thing and turn him into the awakened elder thing. And you want to try to stop them from doing that. Or if you can't stop them, then you need to take out the awakened elder thing, which is much, much harder once it's awake, as you can imagine. I have, let's see, what are the others? I have goblins. The goblins move in and out of hiding, so the ones that are hiding you can't target, but they come out of hiding to attack you. They can't hurt you while they're hidden either. So you'll have them jumping in and out of hiding to mess with you, and they have an ambush ability that takes place whenever they come out of hiding. The reptiles or the lizardmen deck right here, and the reptiles are all really nasty. They're big bads. They don't have a boss, but they have lots of hit points. They don't have a lot of armor. However, they have regeneration and poison. So they put poison counters on you, which again are damage over time that accumulates, and regeneration means that they heal hit points every turn. The big thing with them is that even though they're big and nasty, they actually have loot cards. So when you kill a reptile, you get a loot card that your hero can equip that gives them a special ability. This one helps you with removing poison. This one, the poison blade actually lets you put poison on the enemies, hitting them with their own thing. Antidote lets you cure a whole bunch of poison. This one right here gives you regeneration 1, so you can heal hit points that way, and this one gives you an armor. But you can acquire those loot cards and equip them to make the reptiles a little easier. So they're a much nastier deck as far as the individual units, but they have the loot cards that drop that reward you whenever you kill them. So, yeah, that's kind of the deal. I have an undead deck that features things coming back from the dead and a necromancer who's in play the whole time. So you can whittle down the necromancer, but you have to constantly fight off his evil enemy hordes. But that's Dice Heroes in a nutshell. There's, I didn't want to go into like all the rules or how to play, or this Periscope will never end, but I just printed up and cut and sleeved all 315 of these cards, all 11 heroes, all 6 dungeons, and wanted to kind of show off what I've been working on in the background. I'm still, for those of you who follow some of the other things, I'm still working on Build the Robots. However, it's in basically testing at this point. I consider it a beta. It doesn't need a lot of rules tweaks. It's much more, at this point, about just finding any holes or anything that's broken and fixing it. The game plays through from beginning to end. It doesn't feel like it has a single dominant strategy anymore, so now it's time to push the edges and the envelope and kind of see if we can break it and see what might need to be done if we can. I have a print and play for that one up. I'm also working on my Monday Night Wars game, which is a economic Euro, all about the Monday Night War of professional wrestling. In it, you're playing the head of a wrestling federation, and you're trying to get better ratings than the other wrestling federation. That's kind of the gist of it, is that you're competing to get better ratings and using money to acquire new wrestlers or throw on crazier matches in order to win the ratings war. And that's a much larger game. I know this one's 315 cards, which seems like a lot, but that one's like a full-fledged like Euro game with multiple types of cards and multiple economic things that I have to figure out. So it's a much more involved process, math-wise, before I can even get it to the table. With a game like Dice Heroes, I feel like I can, get the stuff together and get it at least good enough to test and then tweak the numbers, use pen or pencil to modify things on the fly as I need to. Whereas with the much larger Euro game, I kind of want to have some idea of how the math is going to work before I put it on the table the first time. So, but yeah, this is Dice Heroes. Again, I'm I'm working on this one. I hope to get a print and play of this one up. It's a gigantic thing, so I may just post like a smaller sample print and play with like 4 classes or 6 classes, since it plays 4, and then 2 or 3 of the dungeon decks, since they play differently. Or I may release it periodically over time to get some play tests in, but ultimately I would like to pitch this one. I want to pitch all of my games. I'm not looking to self-publish anything, but this is one of the things I'm working on. It's my first cooperative design, and I'm really excited about it. Anyway, this Periscope has gone on long enough, so I'm going to go ahead and let you guys go. Thank you, all of you who tuned in. I really appreciate it, and I'll catch you later.